Alrighty, we're live. My name is Barry William McGlinnity, your host of this episode of the Freedom Series live stream session. I'm honored and blessed to have Alex Charfen on the line. Me and Alex spoke maybe 12 months ago now, had him on an interview. And Alex is someone that I've followed for the last few years and has had a massive impact in my entrepreneur journey, mainly to make me feel normal with all the stuff that I was going through. I remember so many times in my entrepreneur journey feeling like I was alone, feeling like I was having all these issues that no one else around me was having. And Alex, listening to your podcast, meeting you a few times, the discussions we've had has helped me to really normalize that. But not only that, helped me to get back into momentum and create huge results within my business and therefore in the businesses of the clients we work with as well. Mate, I'm so grateful to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Barry. Thanks for having me, man.
So grateful. Mate, the world is in a flux of change at the moment. Let's just say change. And like myself, you're at the forefront of helping entrepreneurs around the world to grow and scale their businesses. I guess first and foremost, you know, a lot of people talking about at the moment, we have a lot of opportunities. A lot of people talking about the chaos we're going on. What's your kind of viewpoint of what you're seeing happening right now with this new world reorder?
Oh man, I think the coronavirus is the biggest accelerator that we've ever seen in the history of man. And I think it's going to accelerate everything in the world. And so if you just think about the premise, this is acceleration, you know, are there going to be things that slow down, get stalled out? Maybe, but I just see it as this massive push. You know, I've lived in, worked in, and been in some form of crisis management my whole career. And, you know, today what we do is we help a few hundred business owners around the world grow and scale their business in a way that's predictable, in a way that they get results month after month, in a way that their businesses grow in the way that they want them to. So we have to be able to do that regardless of what's going on in the market. So our systems, our strategies, they're set up to deal with a crisis. They're set up to deal with ongoing crisis, because when you help somebody get into the 20, 30, 40, 50, $100 million category, it's not, is there a crisis? It's how many and which one are we going to deal with first all the time. So you have to learn how to adjust to crisis, how to adjust to change, how to adjust to what's happening right now. And, you know, here's how I look at this, Barry. I think that this is going to be the biggest accelerator across the board. And any crisis is a period of accelerated change. So think of what was changing before and what type of acceleration are we going to see? Like, let's look at before there was polarization in certain parts of the world. We see accelerated, exaggerated polarization now. Before there was a shift from retail brick and mortar to e-commerce. A friend of mine shared a graph with me a couple of days ago that when you look at the last 10 years of growth, e-commerce versus brick and mortar retail, it's been a very linear growth curve. And since March, it has grown as much as the past 10 years. So we were on this linear growth curve and it's just hockey sticked. So we've had 10 years of growth in a 6-month period in the e-commerce space. And you know what, Barry, I'm seeing that in our membership. We have Daniel Rosen, who owns Credit Repair Cloud, incredible business, has been in business about 12 years. We started with him 2 years ago. He was at 4 million. I think before the crisis, he was around 6 or 7. He's at like 12 or 14 now. Wow. And we have another incredible member we work with, Darian Khosravi. He goes by Cosmo with a K. He's a world champion griller and barbecue rub guy. And his e-commerce business, when he started with us, I think he was around 1 to 2 million. Before Corona, I think it was in the 4 to 6, somewhere there. He's also exceeding 12 million a year right now. And so, you know, in the same way that those are the good stories, here's the challenging stories. Brick and mortar, we've just had 10 years of brick and mortar aging and going out of business in a 6-month period. We've had, you know, when you look around you at small businesses, it's challenging, but any small business that didn't have the right systems, process, structure, routine in place to survive a normal market, or any business that didn't have the right structure, systems, and routine in place that could have survived a normal market, or maybe would limp along in a more normal market, has been accelerated out of business. And so, you know, this is in so many ways, it is the biggest opportunity we've ever had, but we're also going to experience human challenges like we like none of us have ever experienced in our lifetimes. Like that's ensured that we are going to see things and have things happen in the world that we really don't want to see and have happen in the world. So, you know, here's how I look at it. As an entrepreneur, it's our responsibility to figure out how to gain advantage in a crisis. Now, I used to say take advantage of a crisis, but then what people heard was I'm cheering the crisis on. Not a chance. I would never cheer a crisis on.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make sense. And you don't need it. You don't need a crisis to grow your business. There's always a crisis somewhere. And your clients are always in crisis, so they wouldn't buy something from you or your members. But when I look at this as entrepreneurs, it's our responsibility to grow our businesses right now more than it has been before. It's the world needs us now more than it ever has. And so when I look at this, I think it's the most significant, the period of the most significant accelerated change that we will ever experience or have experienced. I don't know about the future, but have experienced. And that means it's accelerated opportunity. And so for entrepreneurs, I think this is the biggest opportunity we've ever had.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And if you're watching us live on various platforms right now, hit the like button, let us know that you're watching. And also please post any questions or comments you've got throughout the show. Would love to get them answered live here for you today. And I think also start a watch party. The button down the right-hand side, start a watch party. More entrepreneurs need to see this message because we haven't been in an accelerated change like we're seeing right now. And we don't know what's next. But I think something you raised was really important is that there is accelerated opportunity. And a big part of it is that, businesses that were struggling to survive before were forced to either innovate or die. Right? Let's be honest. And even businesses that were succeeding before, many of those, gym owners,
had to innovate or die,
were forced to accelerate or die.
Yeah.
How important is mindset though, Alex, when it comes to these types of conversations as well? We talked about strategy and structure and systems and so forth, but our ability as entrepreneurs to be able to reposition ourselves or to be able to create change when there's so much adversity or so much unknown out there, like where does mindset fall into this?
I think that mindset's really important, crucially important, but I think what really can get you through times like this, like mindset is crucial. Here's what we need to remember as entrepreneurs is that how we think, how we approach the world is always going to influence what we do. And so I think, the question, how important is mindset? It's like, it's everything except for it's not going to get you there by itself. But here's how important mindset is. Our focus determines our reality. So our reality is ours to create. And so if you're getting up every day and you're looking at the news and you're arguing politics on Facebook and you're reading every little thing that's going on right now and watching every number of every metric and getting all into it, your reality is going to be that there's a world in crisis where everybody's falling apart, where nothing's going to work anymore. And, there's not going to be any opportunity. You're going to orient yourself towards those things. And the only way that entrepreneurs can enter any type of crisis period, the only way is to say, we are going to grow during this crisis, like regardless of how, and unless it's a personal crisis. Now, here's the only exception. And I want to make an exception because I've seen some weird stuff recently, from some influencers, people who are having massive challenges, like they're going through divorce or they're having serious conflict in their lives, and they're just trying to keep going through it, which in that type of crisis, I have a different strategy, a completely different strategy. But in any crisis, what we need to do is we need to convince ourselves we're going to grow. And here's what I mean by that. You have to orient yourself towards the future, not where you are right now, because today is tactically difficult. You have to say, where am I going in the future? And what is my growth path? Because far too many people in a crisis start saying, you know what, I'm going to maintain. I'm going to stay the same. I'm going to keep everything like where it is right now. And here's the challenge with that type of thinking. A crisis will hurt your business. A crisis is going to challenge your business. And so if you're thinking maintain with the challenge that is coming from a crisis, you might not even maintain. You have to think way past it. I used to practice martial arts and we used to break boards, which is pretty much anybody can do it. But if you stack up like 10 or 15 of them, it gets infinitely harder with each additional board. And there was a point where I would break a ton of them. And the way that you would do that is you don't swing to hit the boards, you swing to go through all of them. You swing like the finish of your swing is 3 feet beyond the boards, so that there's no way you even possibly stop in them. And that's the same way you have to approach a crisis. You have to orient yourself towards growth and convince yourself that you will grow in this crisis. Because here's what happens. When you think growth and when you say, look, you know what, crisis is a period of accelerated change, that means it can be accelerated pain. It can also be accelerated success. And so if I believe that, which has been proven throughout history in 100% of crisis periods, there is billionaires made always. Every depression and recession comes with it a whole new handful of self-made billionaires. And so convince yourself that that's a possibility. And here's what happens. You start seeing the opportunities. Yes. They're everywhere. When the world is in as much pain as it is now, that means every single person needs a painkiller. And so if you can figure out an opportunity where you solve someone's pain and you can sell a painkiller in a crisis, you'd be shocked at what can happen in your life. So that's how I think every single entrepreneur needs to approach this. Now, that being said, I think you also need to have process, structure, and routine in your life so that the world can be in crisis and you and your business can be in momentum. Like that is the big, the big switch between where most entrepreneurs are right now today and where they should be is that when you have a clear strategic plan in your business, when you have a communication system so everybody in the business understands it and you're not the one telling everybody what to do and checking in on them, when you have an infrastructure through which everyone in your business knows a clear outcome they're pursuing, they know what they're doing, they understand their responsibility, they understand the scoreboards. When you put that into your business and you couple it with mindset, then you're one of the businesses that doubles in 6 months, like we've watched our members do, because they had those structures in place. So the second opportunity even showed up, all they did was just turn up the volume on a clear strategic plan, a really clear communication structure, and then making sure everyone knew what they were doing, how they were being judged. Like, this is what we're measuring to see if we're successful, and this is what each person's responsible for. When you enter a period of transition or crisis with those things in place, most of the time you come out the other side having grown tremendously. So, and if you're in a crisis period without those things in place, those are the first things to do. It's not the next funnel. It's not the next promotion. It's first secure the business by getting a clear plan in place that everybody understands, a system so that you communicate it. And then that infrastructure of the business, that's what will get you through a crisis like crazy. And so couple the mindset with that infrastructure. And here's what I found, Barry. Mindset without success is very difficult to maintain.
Yeah.
That's just right. Yeah. And so I think that, the way that I coach entrepreneurs through personal development is giving them the systems to run a business, because when you have to systematically create success, that is the best personal development program there is.
Yeah. Yeah, you said something really interesting. And I remember that I copped a bit of shit at the start of the year. So I stepped out operationally from the Game Changers in December last year, moved to Bali, started to learn to surf, play guitar, and write my first book. And COVID started to hit, and I was fully resourced up in a way, completely disassociated from the business, to be able to look at it objectively, what was going on. And I showed up, and although I'd never experienced anything like COVID-19, the decision that I made is I'm going to grow through this. I'm going to grow physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, like in every aspect of my life, I'm going to go through this and grow. And that was a decision I made. And it was a decision to grow in it rather than to survive it, which is exactly what you said. Now, the moment that decision was made, I started to notice opportunities and started to notice things around me that supported that belief, that decision that I'd made very early on to grow as opposed to survive. The other thing you mentioned as well, I didn't realize I did it until you just mentioned it then, was that I knew I was entering a huge period of uncertainty. And so therefore, I forced more structure into my life to support the massive amount of uncertainty that I was facing. So I brought more structure in around my health, around my fitness, around my sleeping regime, so that at this base level, I had that support from a certainty level that I could deal with so much uncertainty from clients, from staff, from environmental factors. It was very interesting to hear you share that and realize, that was what kind of happened intuitively through that process.
Yeah. So that's awesome, Barry. We coach our members down to having a written morning routine that they check off as they get it done. Because when you're in a period of accelerated change, even decision-making in the morning can create decision-making fatigue by the evening. Yeah. Here's one thing that every entrepreneur knows with certainty. They've made more decisions in the last 6 months than they have in some 6-year periods in their lives. Because every day has presented think of just the layer of new decision making you have in everything you do in your lives. Should I go to this place? Do I need to wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? Do I have hand sanitizer on? Do I not? Do I need to use this one? Do I need to use that one? Like, where do right? Everything has become infinitely more complicated. And so the more we can lower the pressure and noise in our lives, the more we will show up in a way that we can do what you said, look at this objectively and and see massive opportunity. Here's something else that I want to share that I haven't shared on a podcast yet, but we've gone down this vein and of content. Nobody else has asked me about this stuff, but I think one of my skill sets is really managing and understanding how to create massive opportunity in a crisis. And I have a track record for this. After 9/11, I exploded a business. I mean, just grew it. We went from about, I don't know, we were probably doing 70 million in total dollar volume of sales for the company we represented, and went to 250 within a couple of years. And it was because in the crisis, everybody all freaked out. And I increased process, structure, and routine. During the foreclosure crisis, Katie and I, my wife and I, actually ran some real estate businesses that ended up going bankrupt. So we were done. I mean, we were in personal crisis. The entire US economy was in crisis. Within about a year and a half, the entire global economy was in crisis. And in 2007, we created a product called the Certified Distressed Property Expert designation. And from bankruptcy, we launched it, ended up number 21 in the United States, fastest growing company in 2011. We sold 49,000 something real estate agents. And in 2013, the director of distressed property at the US Treasury, Lori Maggiano, came to our office and on a broadcast said that the US Treasury numbers showed that our organization pulled forward the recovery of the foreclosure crisis 5 to 7 years and saved somewhere around 4 to 7 million people from foreclosure. And that was because it was a crisis. Like I tune in when it's a crisis, I do really well. And here's why. This is one of the commonalities of every time I've been through a crisis is I pursue most likely scenario. And I know that that's an unfamiliar term for most people. MLS, most likely scenario, it's a crisis management tool to say, in a crisis, I definitely want to estimate what is the worst that could happen. I also want to look at what's the best case scenario. But then there's this thing that everybody kind of knows called most likely scenario, that based on current data and human behavior, you can predict about what's going to happen. And here's what's happened with this crisis. It's so big and so overwhelming and affecting so many people at the same time, and psychologically challenging us in a very unique way, where this is a relationship now, right? Zoom. This is about as much human contact as we get with people. And so we've taken a mass population of people, isolated them, pretty much put like some populations on a complete lockdown. And so we're in this crazy psychological experiment where a lot of people are seeing conspiracy theories, or they're feeling like there's some untoward behavior here, or there's parties that are arguing, or it's political, or whatever it is. And you know what, Barry, at the beginning of this, I had a hard time hearing any of it, but now I talked to some of my friends and they've explained it in ways where I'm like, you know what, some of these arguments kind of make sense. And some of them seem to have some truth in them. And some of them seem to have some stuff there that looks real, when I was navigating the crisis of 9/11, a bunch of people pointed out, I'm Arab, so I have Lebanese family. 9/11 was carried out by a whole bunch of Saudi Arabians that we were going to Iraq for. There was so much weirdness there and conspiracy feeling stuff there. And now there's been documentary after documentary that's explained it. But here's the reality of navigating that crisis. There was a most likely scenario. And today with COVID-19, there is a clear mathematical and behavioral most likely scenario, and I share it often, and since the beginning of this crisis, I've been going on either Facebook Lives or doing webinars and sharing predictions about what will happen next, while everybody's like, you can't predict anything. Everything's up in the air. The testing's not real. The data's not real. This isn't real. And I've been making predictions about what would happen, exactly what would happen in the economy, with numbers, with what would come next, what categories were going to crash. And every one of them has been exactly what has happened next. And it's not because I'm a fortune teller. It's because when you look at this thing called most likely scenario and you take the available data and you extrapolate it forward based on human behavior, you can clearly see what's going to happen next. And so this is what I did in the foreclosure crisis. And we predicted within about a 60-day time frame when each state in the United States felt the foreclosure crisis. Well, if you started looking at the data early on this, you could have predicted when each state was going to feel this crisis. And when, I live in Texas, when our lockdown was releasing, just based on numbers that we saw overseas and based on numbers that we saw in New York and other parts of the country, we knew that because we were growing as we opened our lockdown, that growth was probably going to continue and increase in severity, and it did. And we had to go back into not complete lockdown, but they even started saying that you had to wear masks in most areas of Texas, and we were one of the big holdouts. And so, here's the key as an entrepreneur. If you believe in a conspiracy theory, or you think that this is just political or whatever it is, I can understand that. But here's reality is it's probably going to play out like every other crisis in history. It's hard to find a crisis where it's like, oh, look, halfway through it ended because it was a big conspiracy. It really, like, they all play out. And then decades later, they say or they either prove or disprove, or kind of end up in this weird, there's always a doubt thing. So I think that's the key, Barry, is that the entrepreneurs who look at the data and logic between what will most likely happen next, plan around that, and put contingencies in place for the worst and hope for the best, those are the ones who are going to crush it. And the ones who see this as an opportunity to go out and like fight with other entrepreneurs and at the beginning, there's been more than once where I've posted a post that I regretted because I didn't know it was political. Like, everything has become so political that like you can't say anything anymore without being political. But there's more than once where I've accidentally invoked or like started a political conversation on Facebook, and I'm like, man, how fast can I turn this off? Because here's what all of us should be focused on. What is most likely to happen based on the available data? It's not that hard to predict. Yeah. And that's what we should be behaving around.
And also what you said before too, like being clear of where you want to go. And is me getting caught up in conspiracy theories helping me to get to my outcome, or help me grow my business, help me to serve more people, or not? I can't have an opinion, but there's a time and a place for that opinion. And maybe it's not right now when, the world needs what we have to share. I have a couple of questions coming in. If you're watching us live this morning or this evening, wherever you are in the world, welcome. So grateful to have you on the show. Please hit the like button and keep your comments and questions coming in. Phil from Perth, speaking of mindset, question for Alex. Who was Alex's mentor who helped him leverage an entrepreneur personality to success? Who were some of your early mentors, Alex?
Honestly, one of the first mentors I ever had, I was 13 years old, and his name's Rick Lara. We're still Facebook friends. We're actually still really close friends. He was my high school speech teacher. So I was accidentally put in a speech and debate class when I was 13 years old in high school, and Rick Lara was the teacher. And I was terrified. I did not like crowds. I didn't like being in front of people. I had a stutter where I would get stuck saying a word. And so it would look like I was just thinking really hard, and then the word would finally come out. It was pretty challenging. So I did not want to be in a speech class, but I ended up in Rick's class. The first day there, I had this feeling like of understanding, and like the way that he talked about things, the way that he drove his class through process and through structure and made it really clear what was going to happen next. I leaned in, and I was in his class throughout high school. Some semesters I took 2 of his classes because he taught debate, persuasive communication, forensics, which was like the advanced communication. And I can't remember, there was one other, or interpersonal communication. And I took all of them multiple times. And, when people ask me, like, how did I create the success that I have, or like, what's the most influential thing? I tell them, like, I think I learned everything I needed to know to be successful as an entrepreneur in Rick's class. He showed me how to speak. He showed me how to lead people. It was very clear that process, structure, and routine didn't just make you a better speaker, but it made you better at everything you were doing. And I think he was one of the most influential mentors I ever had.
Wow, incredible. And you could definitely see a flare of entrepreneurship from a very young age there too, Alex.
Oh, yeah.
Question here from Colin from Melbourne. So I'm not sure if you're aware or not, Melbourne's gone back down to lockdown as of like a week.
Yeah, I have friends in Melbourne. They told me about it.
Yeah, so Alex's message is welcome fresh news. Could he talk about how he hurdled the initial financial disappointments in the early days?
Sure. So there's a huge parallel here. So the way that I figured out what was going on during the foreclosure, here's what happened during the foreclosure crisis. Katie and I started getting tons of foreclosures because we owned a bunch of property, and I started looking at the documentation, and with each new foreclosure, it felt like the documentation got worse. It was basically like a "you're kicked out of your house" document. It didn't say we can work this out. It didn't say we should have a conversation. It just said like, you're done. And And not only that, in the United States, when you get foreclosed on, it's served by a police officer or an officer of the court. So it's somebody in a uniform giving you paperwork. So it's very intimidating, very frightening. Even though I knew it was coming, and I was a real estate investor, I was very familiar with foreclosure. I had helped hundreds of people with their own foreclosures. To be getting my own was devastating. And it drove me to say, wait, how did this happen? How did I lose all my properties? Because all our property went down in value so fast. It was crazy. We lost tens of millions of dollars in months. And I started doing research and looking at what were the numbers behind the foreclosure crisis. And here's what was really easy to determine: how many really bad loans had been written, when were they written, and when were their adjustment periods going to end? So when were people going to have higher payments? Because that's where most people were defaulting. So there was a default rate prior to the higher payment. There was a default rate at the higher payment. We just took that and extrapolated it forward by state and in some cases by city. And we could literally predict you're going to have 75 foreclosures plus or minus in this area next month. And here's what was crazy about that. My team and I successfully did that over and over again, because what we would do is I'd go speak in Boise, Idaho, and we'd pull the numbers on Boise and we'd run them and say, okay, it's probably going to be about these 2 months. So 3 months from now, they're going to really get hit. It's probably going to be about this many properties. And, we've already done this across the country with success. And we would go to Boise and, we didn't realize that we should never go someplace until there was already foreclosures happening. We tried to do it ahead of time. And here's what would happen every single time. I only did it 3 or 4 times, because in every city they would say, oh, you know what? We really appreciate your information and the data and the numbers, and we get it. We understand it looks really good, but it's not going to happen here. So you don't understand Boise, or you don't understand this, or you don't understand whatever city I was in, I didn't understand. And it was fascinating, because here was this global foreclosure crisis. By the time we got to Idaho, it was global. And people were denying that it was going to happen to them. By the end of that crisis, every state in our country was hit. Some were not hit as hard as others, but every single state in our country lost property value. And every time I would go out and speak to someplace where the crisis hadn't hit, they would say, it won't happen here. And I just watched that movie happen again since March. Here in Texas, I would talk to people about, here's what's going to happen based on behavior and data. Sometime in the next couple of months, we're going to start seeing some really crazy numbers. This is going to be really challenging. Oh man, we're not having mask order. We're opening everything up. This is going to be way more challenging. And people would say, Alex, I just don't know. I don't think it's going to happen here. And so there's this disassociation that we make as humans in a crisis, where we don't want it to happen to us so bad that we make up a story that it's not possible where we are. And so I think it's interesting how that has replayed almost to a T with this current crisis, because right now the behavior of this virus, the behavior of what's going on is really predictable, not kind of predictable, but painfully predictable. And there's evidence now, both behaviorally from the rest of the world, reported from the rest of the world, of what's working and what's not working. And so you can basically look at that evidence and say, hey, here's what's working and what's not working, and what is happening where I am. And then you can say, we're either in more trouble or less trouble. The one thing that looks like a very positive right now is there's a number of different places where, for either behavioral reasons or behavioral reasons mixed with a percentage of the population who's acquired immunity by getting the virus, that numbers are now going down. So the good news is we're starting to see some tailing off, but everything that has happened so far has been so predictable. Literally, I can publish podcasts where I started predicting April what would happen in May and June what would happen in July and August, and it's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, fantastic. Great questions. A couple more here. Question from Sarah here. Alex, you mentioned a lot about predicting the future. What do you think the next 12 months looks like?
I think that the next 12 months is a local question. And I think that's really important for all of us to understand, is that, it's really two things. It's local. And then if you're like me and your business is international, it's understanding really a little bit about what's going on globally. And here's what I think it looks like. I think we have a novel virus that is been set free in the world. It has only mutated once, and that mutation made it more contagious, but thankfully not more lethal, which is good. The numbers have been really like very predictable. So if you look at the numbers overall, here's what we've seen is that mortality rates have improved over time. And because with treatment options and understanding of what doctors are doing, like at the very beginning, this has acted so unlike anything in history that a lot of doctors were having trouble figuring out what to do. Now there's better protocols in place. There's better options in place. And so this is what happens in every virus. Mortality rate goes down because doctors get better at treating it and less people get it, hopefully over time. And what we've also seen is that in areas where they're not distancing or they don't have mask policies in place, there seems to be a direct correlation to distancing and masks and driving the virus numbers down. And so I think the next 12 months look like, depending on where you are, if there's distancing and masks, that the numbers could go down to the point where in some populations, they're going to be able to go back to a somewhat normal life like they have in areas like Vietnam and New Zealand, where they've driven the numbers down so low, they can do contact tracing and testing. So, when that means there's so low numbers that there's a team of people there that can go and say, all right, this person had it. Let's find everybody who had it, quarantine them all, make sure they're quarantined, snuff it out, and then it won't keep going. I think that in other areas, unfortunately, like the United States, we're in a dilemma where hopefully we're seeing some decline of this virus. In some areas of the country, we're not, but hopefully we start to see it kind of get to a point where naturally it ebbs away like some viruses do. And then I really don't hope that there's here's the biggest challenge that I feel is that if this virus acts like the 1918 virus and goes away and then comes back in a second wave, I feel like so many different populations today don't believe in it or want to deny the reality or don't believe the numbers are severe enough that we should do anything about it, that second wave could be really devastating if it behaves that way. So I think, there's a ton of questions in the next 12 months, but there's some certainties. If you're in a population where the human behavior is going to be intermixed with a novel virus, your numbers are going to go up and it's going to continue to be challenging. It's challenging to live in the United States right now. It's very challenging. We're looking at, they're trying to reopen schools, and as soon as the schools open, they start finding cases. We have the whole thing's been very politicized. Our numbers are high kind of across the board. There's only a couple states where they've driven them down to the point where they meet any type of rational guidelines to actually open schools and get together in groups and stuff. And so I think if you're in an area of the world like New Zealand, where they've driven the numbers down to the point of almost non-existence, you have an unfair advantage over the rest of the world.
Yeah, in Perth here, I believe there's no current active cases at all when everything's open. Like, we're living a normal life here, but they've done very well on border control and the way they've isolated people coming in and so forth to not only get the numbers down but keep them down and to a point now I think it's non-existent.
That's fantastic.
Had a massive flare back up. A couple more questions. Another one here from Phil. I have a book, The Entrepreneurial Personality Type. Please tell us how could people use it to fight off imposter syndrome?
So I have a podcast on this with about, I think it's 15 or 18 minutes or something, called Kill the Imposter. You should check it out, Phil, because so first, I think that the most critical thing about imposter syndrome is understanding it. What we think it is a negative voice inside our heads, but what it really is it's the protective voice. It's the overly protective voice inside our heads that slows us down from making mistakes. Like, sometimes we want that voice. Because here's the reality of imposter syndrome. Imposters don't have imposter syndrome. They're imposters. Imposter syndrome only happens when you're somebody who is rational enough and sane enough to know that when you are entering a place of vulnerability, you should be questioned. And you should be slowed down. And let's get real. We all need that. We're entrepreneurs. If we didn't have brakes on this system, things would go very bad. Well, most of us I wouldn't probably be 47 if I had zero brakes. And so we need that. We need that rational part, that sane part, that questioning part, that sometimes judgmental part of us. But the way that you overcome imposter syndrome is one day at a time. You kill the imposter every day, because As an entrepreneurial personality type, here's what we do. We are that small percentage of the population that travels into the future, creates a new reality, comes back to the present, and then demands it becomes real. That exposes us to a level of vulnerability and criticism and shame and so much else that it's overwhelming. And the day you say, I'm an entrepreneur, is the day you declare you're a commodity that can be judged like not a human being. Go look at anybody's Facebook ad comments and you'll see what I'm talking about. And so the way you kill and that's reality. Like there's no one should ever tell you different, but there's a reason you ask the question, because you can't make it go away. And if you can't make it go away, you have to find a way through this, not over it or under it. And the only way through imposter syndrome is to do what is telling you shouldn't do every single day. And so when I first wrote this book, Russell Brunson, my friend, said, he's been a pretty intense mentor to me. It's weird to say Russell's a mentor because he's younger than I am, but then he says I'm his mentor too. So I feel better about it, but I feel like he's helped me far more than I've helped him, just so you know. So, but Russell was like, he's like, dude, you have to, he saw me do a presentation and he's like, man, you got to publish every day. He told me this in a hallway. And I trust Russell because he's a super smart guy. And he always just tells you exactly what you need to know. He doesn't care. And sometimes it stings, but he'll just tell you anyway. And he says it in a kind and nice way, but sometimes you're like, that kind of stung, but I needed to hear it. And he told me I had to publish every day. And doing the first Facebook Live was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I had 20 years camera experience. I had been on Home Shopping Network. And when I was a consultant, I used to sometimes go on Home Shopping Network here in the United States. It's one of the largest networks there is. I sold $29 million in a 24-hour period on TV. That's pressure. Wow. Holding up a phone and doing my first Facebook Live, I felt like I was going to die. And I had no idea why. It was the weirdest feeling ever. And then there was the day, I don't know, a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I think maybe a little bit more, I did it. It was on the way into a wedding with my wife. And I'm like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to do it today. If I don't do it today, I'm going to have trouble doing tomorrow. So I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to do the first video. And you know what? I took a little chunk out of the imposter. And then the next day I did another one. And the next day I did another one. And Russell challenged me to publish every day for a year. And I did. And by the end of the year, I'm like, I'm so glad that's over, because now I don't have to publish every day. I've got so much attention and I'm over it. You know, I mean, I wanted to do it for the full year, but by the end of that, now picking up the phone and doing a Facebook Live, I want you to know something. Even though I've done that, even though I've done hundreds of these, even though I get almost exclusively positive comments, every time there's a little voice that says, should you do it right now? Is this the right time? And I'm like, live. I'm not going to let the imposter take over. And so the way that I think you should do this is you take a chunk out of it every single day. You know, I want to share a quick story with you. When I was younger, there was this guy on TV named Johnny Carson. I think most of the world has heard that name, maybe not, but here in the United States, he was the late night TV show host. He was one of the highest paid personalities in the United States. And he had a show that started after the 10 o'clock news. So it was 11 to 11:30 every night for, I think, like 27 years, and had, you know, every celebrity, everybody who's famous, what you had to go through the Johnny Carson show to like even be in show business. He didn't really miss anybody. Even people who didn't do TV went on the Johnny Carson show because of who he was. He was that revered, that well-known. He was hilarious. He did a warm-up every night. Here's what most of the public doesn't know about Johnny Carson. Each night that he walked out on stage, he walked through a split curtain that somebody pulled back for him, and they always pulled it back to the right. So when you were looking at the stage, it went this way. The reason is this way was a trash can. And directly before the end of his introduction song, every night he would throw up in the trash can from nervousness. And then the person would wait until he was done, open the curtain, and that's when Johnny Carson came on stage. Every night, the imposter was so strong, it made him vomit in a trash can. And he was one of the all-time greatest hosts in the history of TV. So some of us, like when you have that thing in you where you can't turn it off and you wonder why anyone would want to, you just have to take a chunk out of the imposter every single day. And you know what? If you're going on a Facebook Live or you're going on stage and you're not throwing up, you're ahead of one of the most famous speakers of all time and one of the most well-known personalities of all time on TV. So, you know, we've all been there.
Alex, this is why I absolutely love connecting, having the show. Always so many amazing insights and light bulb moments around exposing the entrepreneur personality type. For those that are watching or tuning in today, what's the best way they can connect you? You got something pretty amazing coming up in the
We
next
do.
month or so.
Yeah, we do. So in October, at the beginning of October, I'm doing a free course for anyone who anything we've talked about has resonated with. But what we're going to cover is the entrepreneurial personality type in depth, the billionaire code in depth. So those two things will do the following. It'll help you understand yourself better than you ever have. But more importantly, once you understand the billionaire code, you'll understand yourself and where you are in business so that you will have certainty about what needs to happen next and you can move forward. And I'm doing 3 days in the same week. We're hoping to get hundreds of people there. If you go to momentummasterclass.com, you can register, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So register, make sure that you're there live. I'll answer all the questions that come up. And from the beginning of that time together to the end, you will understand. You'll understand yourself better. You'll understand your business intimately. You will have an entirely new view of what your final destination is and clarity like you've never had before.
Yeah. So regardless of where you're at right now in an entrepreneurial journey, your business journey, please do yourself a favor, connect with Alex. You've got an amazing podcast as well, but momentummasterclass.com, get yourself registered. It's going to be a hell of an event, and I'll certainly be there as well.
Thank you, Barry. I really appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, mate, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate having you here. If you're watching this show and you're trying to build a business that can work without you as well, please grab a copy of my first book, The Path to Freedom, the 9 steps to build a highly profitable and purpose-driven business that can work without you. That was a journey, Alex. It's funny, resonate with some of the stories you're sharing, because I grew up and was teased a lot about not being able to read and spell and having massive grammatical issues. And I wanted to write a book for years. And there was an aspect that didn't feel successful enough to write a book, the imposter syndrome, but also an aspect of me going, oh, like, who are you to even think you can write a book with your level of spelling and grammatical challenges you had. But it's funny how when we make a decision to do something, we'll always find a way through it, and how often, leaning into that discomfort can be the greatest growth opportunity as well that we face as entrepreneurs.
No question. I mean, that's here's one of the ways we help our members is when you lower the pressure and noise in your life intentionally, when you take out the things that you know are causing you challenges, pressure and noise, here's what happens. It starts to reveal to you like what you really want and what you're really capable of and what you really can do. And so the more you lower the pressure and noise, the more those things start appearing and showing up. I feel the same way, Barry, and I'm dyslexic. So I think I've waited far too long to publish my first book, and I've waited far too long to publish the second one. We now have a plan in place where that will not happen again, and we're going to publish books regularly. But a lot of that is my feeling like, hey, I'm dyslexic. I have a hard time reading. It's like, to say you're going to write a book, it's one of those huge things, but you got to kill the imposter.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex Charfen, it's been an absolute pleasure. So grateful for you, dude, and for everything you're doing in the world, helping entrepreneurs just grow and scale great businesses. Thanks so much for your time. Guys, keep the questions and comments coming in. Make sure you register for Alex's Momentum Masterclass as well. And dude, hopefully we'll get a chance to connect again soon.
I really appreciate it, Barry. And yeah, let's do that, man.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Game Changers podcast. There's a couple of things I'd love you to do to help us and help yourself to spread the message further. Make sure that you like the Game Changers on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn. Please subscribe by clicking the link below to ensure that you keep up to date with the weekly episodes we share here at the Game Changers podcast with amazing entrepreneurs and business owners around the world. And of course, like if you're in a position where you may be overwhelmed with business or looking for a way to grow faster, more effectively, and you realize that the key to success is being surrounded by amazing people who have been there and done that before, I'd like to invite you to apply to have a game plan session one-on-one with one of my team here at the Game Changers. There's no cost if you get through. All that we ask is that you are doing a minimum of $250,000 per year to really be able to utilize the strategies and the tactics and the mindset shifts that we share with you, that you're coachable, that you're a decent person, and you're willing to take on board some advice. If not, that's totally cool. But I know for me, I wouldn't be where I am right now without the support of so many mentors and coaches and resources along the way. And I'd like to pay that forward and give back to you the opportunity to work with us one-on-one for free to put together a customized game plan. And the reason we're doing this is a couple of things. Number one is that sometimes it's just the smallest thing that can make the biggest difference. And I think that entrepreneurs and business owners have the opportunity to change the world. And if we can maybe help you to make the smallest shift to change your life and your world, you're changing ours in return. The second thing is that we are always looking for amazing clients to work with and to welcome into and invite into the Game Changers community. And so if at the end of the call, you do feel that there's a huge amount of value there, that we feel that there's a great values fit there, we can have a conversation about working together. But this game plan call, there's absolutely no obligations to work with whatsoever. Allow us to help you with the years and years and years of knowledge that we have in growing and scaling great companies. And I think that business owners are the future of the world. And if there's a way that we can help you to create a better business, more profit, more fulfillment, more fun, I would love the opportunity to do that now. So click the link below, book your game plan session, make sure you follow us on social, and start to date with the latest episodes of the Game Changers podcast. My name's Barry William McGlinnity. Thank you so much for your support, and look forward to seeing the next one. Bye for now.